The cursed doll. The doll sat on the top shelf of the dusty old shop, a silent sentinel over a clutter of forgotten memories. Its porcelain face was cracked, the once rosy cheeks faded to a sickly pallor. But its eyes drew me in deep blue, almost black, and they seemed to follow me as I moved around the room. I'd been sent to this part of town by a tip for an article about haunted antiques. As a journalist, it was my job to find stories, but standing there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this doll had found me. The shopkeeper was a wizened old man with a permanent scowl etched into his face. He saw me looking at the doll and shook his head. "Not for sale," he grumbled, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. "Why not?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Bad luck," he replied, turning away to tend to another part of the shop. I felt a surge of curiosity and defiance. "I'll pay double." The shopkeeper paused, his back still to me. "Triple, and it's yours." "But don't say I didn't warn you," he turned back, his eyes hard and unyielding. It was a hefty price, but I handed over the money without hesitation. As I walked out of the shop, the doll cradled in my arms, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air seemed to grow colder, and the street outside appeared darker, more sinister. I shook off the feeling and headed home. My apartment was a small, cozy place, filled with books and knickknacks from my travels. I placed the doll on a shelf in my living room, its dark eyes staring out into the space. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then the whispers began. At first, I thought it was the wind, or perhaps the creaking of the old building. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from the doll, though whenever I approached it, the sound would cease. One night, I woke to find the doll had moved. It was no longer on the shelf, but sitting on my bedside table, its eyes fixed on me. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at it, the whispers growing louder until they filled the room. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was menacing, filled with malice. I tried to get rid of the doll, throwing it into the dumpster behind my building. But the next morning it was back on the shelf, its eyes gleaming with a dark satisfaction. Panic set in, and I began to research the doll's origins, hoping to find some way to break whatever curse it carried. My search led me to an old library filled with obscure texts on the occult. There I found a book that mentioned a doll matching the description of mine. It had belonged to a little girl named Emily, who had died under mysterious circumstances. Her spirit, it seemed, had attached itself to the doll, seeking revenge on anyone who came into possession of it. The more I read, the more I realized the danger I was in. Emily's spirit was vengeful, and it wouldn't rest until it had claimed another victim. Desperation drove me to seek out a medium, a woman who specialized in dealing with haunted objects. The medium, Madame Serena, was a tall, thin woman with piercing green eyes. She took one look at the doll and shook her head. "This is no ordinary haunting," she said, her voice low and grave. "The spirit attached to this doll is powerful and malevolent. It won't be easy to break the curse." Madame Serena agreed to help, but she warned me that the process would be dangerous. We would need to perform a ritual to summon the spirit and then bind it, preventing it from harming anyone else. That night, we set up the ritual in my living room. Candles flickered around the doll, and the air grew heavy with the scent of incense. Madame Serena began to chant in a language I didn't understand, her voice rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. As the chanting continued, the temperature in the room dropped, and a dark mist began to swirl around the doll. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and I felt a pressure building in my head. Suddenly, the doll's eyes glowed with a sinister light, and a shadowy figure appeared, looming over us. "Emily," Madame Serena called out, her voice strong and commanding. "You must release your hold on this world. Your vengeance is misplaced. Let go of your anger and find peace." The figure hissed, its eyes burning with hatred. "You can't make me," it spat, its voice a chilling echo. "I will have my revenge." Madame Serena's chanting grew louder, more forceful, and the figure began to writhe in pain. I watched in horror as the shadowy form twisted and contorted, its screams filling the room. Finally, with a final agonized wail, the figure dissolved into the mist, which slowly dissipated. The room fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting. The doll sat lifeless on the table, its eyes dull and empty. Madame Serena collapsed into a chair, exhausted but triumphant. "It's done," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The spirit is gone." Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by the knowledge of how close I had come to losing everything. The doll, now just a hollow shell, was a stark reminder of the darkness that had nearly consumed me. I thanked Madame Serena and vowed to be more cautious in the future. The experience had left me shaken, but it had also reignited the spark of curiosity that had driven me to become a journalist in the first place. I wrote the story of the cursed doll, detailing every chilling moment. It was published and became one of the most talked about articles of my career. People were fascinated and horrified by the tale, and it served as a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. But even as I moved on with my life, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's spirit was still out there, waiting for another chance to exact her revenge. The doll may have been neutralized, but the darkness it represented was always just a whisper away. Weeks passed, and I began to feel a sense of normalcy returning to my life. The nightmares had stopped, and the whispers were gone. One evening, as I sat down to relax, the doorbell rang. Puzzled, I opened the door to find a small, neatly wrapped package on my doorstep. There was no return address. I brought the package inside, my hands trembling slightly. As I unwrapped it, a chill ran down my spine. Inside was a small porcelain doll with deep blue eyes that seemed to follow me. A note lay beneath it, written in an ornate, almost archaic handwriting: "We are never truly alone." The doll's eyes gleamed with a dark satisfaction, and the whispers began anew.